My name is Thomas Thackeray, and I have been brought up from infancy to the confines of middle age by a fond mother whose chief solicitude has been to keep me screened from what she called the coarser realities of life. When she died, she left me alone in a world that was as real as ever and a good deal coarser than I considered it had any need to be. To a man of my temperament and upbringing, even a simple railway journey was crammed with petty annoyances and minor discords, and as I settled myself down in a second-class compartment one September morning, I was conscious of ruffled feelings and general mental discomposure. I had been staying at a country vicarage, the inmates of which had been certainly neither brutal nor bacchanalian, but their supervision of the domestic establishment had been of the lax order which invites disaster. The pony carriage that was to take me to the station had never been properly ordered, and when the moment for my departure drew near, the handy man who should have produced the required article was nowhere to be found. In this emergency, to my mute but very intense disgust, I found myself obliged to collaborate with the vicar's daughter in the task of harnessing the pony, which necessitated groping about in an ill-lighted outbuilding called a stable, and smelling very like one, except in patches where it smelled of mice. Without being actually afraid of mice, I classed them among the coarser incidents of life, and considered that Providence, with a little exercise of moral courage, might long ago have recognized that they were not indispensable, and have withdrawn them from circulation. As the train glided out of the station, my nervous imagination accused myself of exhaling a weak odour of stable-yard, and possibly of displaying a mouldy straw or two on my unusually well-brushed garments. Fortunately, the only other occupant of the compartment, a lady of about the same age as myself, seemed inclined for slumber rather than scrutiny. The train was not due to stop till the terminus was reached, in about an hour's time, and the carriage was of the old-fashioned sort that had no communication with the corridor. Therefore no further travelling companions were likely to intrude on my semi-privacy. And yet the train had scarcely attained its normal speed before I became reluctantly but vividly aware that I was not alone with the slumbering lady. I was not even alone in my own clothes. A warm, creeping movement over my flesh betrayed the unwelcome and highly resented presence, unseen but poignant, of a strayed mouse that had evidently dashed into its present retreat during the episode of the pony harnessing. Furtive stamps and shakes and wildly directed pinches failed to dislodge the intruder, and then I lay back against the cushions and endeavoured rapidly to evolve some means for putting an end to the dual ownership of my clothes. It was unthinkable that I should continue for the space of a whole hour in this horrible position, for my imagination had at least doubled the numbers of the alien invasion. On the other hand, nothing less drastic than partial disrobing would ease me of my tormentor, and to undress in the presence of a lady, even for so laudable a purpose, was an idea that made my ear-tips tingle in a blush of abject shame. I had never been able to bring myself even to the mild exposure of open-work socks in the presence of the fair sex, and yet the lady in this case was to all appearances soundly and securely asleep. The mouse, on the other hand, seemed to be trying to crowd a year's travelling into a few strenuous minutes. If there is any truth in the theory of transmigration, this particular mouse must certainly have been in a former state a member of the Alpine Club. Sometimes, in its eagerness, it lost its footing and slipped for half an inch or so, and then, in fright, or more probably temper, it bit. I was, therefore, goaded into the most audacious undertaking of my life. Crimsoning to the hue of a beetroot, and keeping an agonized watch on my slumbering fellow-traveller, I swiftly and noiselessly secured the ends of my railway rug to the racks on either side of the carriage, so that a substantial curtain hung athwart the compartment. In the narrow dressing-room that I had thus improvised, I proceeded with violent haste to to extricate myself partially and the mouse entirely from the surrounding casings of tweed and half wool. As the unravelled mouse gave a wild leap to the floor, the rug, slipping its fastening at either end, also came down with a heart-curdling flop, and almost simultaneously the awakened sleeper opened her eyes. With a movement almost quicker than the mouse's, I pounced on the rug and hauled its ample folds chin-high over my dismantled person as I collapsed into the farther corner of the carriage. The blood raced and beat in the veins of my neck and forehead, while I waited dumbly for the communication cord to be pulled. The lady, however, contented herself with a silent stare at her strangely muffled companion. How much had she seen? I queried to myself. And in any case, what on earth must she think of my present posture? I think I have caught a chill, I ventured desperately. Really? I'm sorry, she replied. I was just going to ask if you would open this window. I fancy it's malaria, I added, my teeth chattering slightly, as much from fright as from a desire to support my theory. I've got some brandy in my hold all, if you'll kindly reach it down for me, said my companion. Not for words. I mean, I never take anything for it, I assured her earnestly. I suppose you caught it in the tropics? For someone whose acquaintance with the tropics was limited to an annual present of a chest of tea from an uncle in Ceylon, I felt that even the malaria was slipping from me. Would it be possible, I wondered, to disclose the real state of affairs to her in small instalments? Are you afraid of mice? I ventured, growing if possible more scarlet in the face. Not unless they come in quantities. Why do you ask? I had one crawling inside my clothes just now, I said in a voice that hardly seemed my own. It was a most awkward situation. It must have been if you wear your clothes at all tight, she observed. But mice have strange ideas of comfort. I had to get rid of it while you were asleep, I continued. Then, with a gulp, I added, it was getting rid of it that brought me to this. Surely leaving off one small mouse wouldn't bring on a chill, she exclaimed with a levity that I accounted abominable. Evidently she had detected something of my predicament and was enjoying my confusion. All the blood in my body seemed to have mobilized in one concentrated blush, and an agony of abasement worse than a myriad mice crept up and down over my soul. And then, as reflection began to assert itself, sheer terror took the place of humiliation. With every minute that passed, the train was rushing nearer to the crowded and bustling terminus, where dozens of prying eyes would be exchanged for the one paralysing pair that watched me from the farther corner of the carriage. There was one slender, despairing chance, which the next few minutes must decide. My fellow traveller might relapse into a blessed slumber, but as the minutes throbbed by, that chance ebbed away. The furtive glance which I stole at her from time to time disclosed only an unwinking wakefulness. I think we must be getting near now, she presently observed. I had already noticed with growing terror the recurring stacks of small, ugly dwellings that heralded the journey's end. The words acted as a signal. Like a hunted beast breaking cover and dashing madly towards some other haven of momentary safety, I threw aside the rug and struggled frantically into my dishevelled garments. I was conscious of dull suburban stations racing past the window, of a choking, hammering sensation in my throat and heart, and of an icy silence in that corner toward which I dared not look. Then, as I sank back into my seat, clothed and almost delirious, the train slowed down to a final crawl, and the woman spoke. "Would you be so kind," she asked, "as to get me a porter to put me into a cab? It's a shame to trouble you when you're feeling unwell, but being blind makes one so helpless at a railway station."